Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthew Davis. I'm here along with my team, Andrew, Sarah, and Cash. And today, we are here to present to you the winning proposal for the challenges that your company is currently facing. So on the agenda today, we'll be sure to go over the mission, over the challenges that the organization is facing, the proposal, question and answer section, and wrap it all up with the conclusion. So we saw it very fit for us to recognize the mission when we came up with a proposal for your company. It's important for us to root our proposal within the mission because we are a nonprofit and we want to ensure that we are fulfilling our mission. The mission of our LAYC is to empower a diverse population of youth to achieve a successful transition to adulthood through innovative programs that address youth social, academic, and career needs. So, two of the organizational challenges that LAYC is currently faced with is, first of all, overdependence on government funding. Secondly, lack of volunteer infrastructure. Currently, there are 73.5% of funding that comes from government, which is restricted funding. What we need to do is figure out a way to diversify our revenue stream as to decrease the restricted revenues that we are currently receiving. The second challenge that we are currently faced with is lack of volunteer infrastructure. Currently, we have 40 to 100 volunteers annually. These volunteers are made up of students as well as adults within the area. However, we have no streamlined process for the volunteer program, and we have no training process that is sustainable for future development and growth within our communities. So what we're proposing to you today is PYDIA, which is Positive Youth Development in Action, and we're also proposing a volunteer infrastructure program that will allow us to reach our mission within our wider communities. And right now I want to hand it over to Andrew, who will go over Positive Youth Development in Action.
Thank you, Matthew. So what Positive Youth Development in Action is essentially an iteration of Positive Youth Development in the way that they use it at LAYC right now, but adapted so that other organizations may use it to achieve their goals. So what's different? Right now, Positive Youth Development is a 42-hour program that's very intensive for staff, time. It's very expensive for organizations that might be cash-strapped like ourselves. So we'd like to adapt this program to a 20 to 30-hour curriculum with a licensed curriculum handbook that we would sell to companies. This would be suitable for larger groups so we could have fewer trainers and more trainees per session. So that means fewer sessions and more people trained per session. So this drives down our implementation costs and helps us achieve higher scalability. We will charge $150 per trainer packet and $100 per trainee. So is there a demand for this program? We believe that there is. Boys and Girls Club alone spent over $100 million in leadership training and development programs in 2013, which was 64% of their annual expenses. Stanford Social Innovation Review identified a number of nonprofits who believe that leadership development and training is vital to them achieving their mission, but it's also an area that they fall short in achieving their potential. Our potential market is also quite large, with around 37,000 youth-serving organizations in the nation and hundreds in the DC area alone. So we believe that this is an area in which organizations like our own, with missions like our own, see as valuable. They're willing to spend money on it, and there are a number of them that could, kind of define our market. A little timeline for Positive Youth Development in Action. Our first 6 months we dedicate to the design of the curriculum and the handbook. After we designed this curriculum and handbook to suit our goals, we would then implement it in a number of test sites and obtain some data from this, both measurables and immeasurables, testimonial reviews from the places that we've implemented this program, and this would leave us with our proof of concept. Sort of just proof that this is a valuable service, that the organizations we have implemented it in have seen value and growth and has helped them achieve their mission more effectively. After this, we will aim to expand Positive Youth Development in Action to generate more unrestricted revenue for LAYC and continue the expansion of this program so we generate more revenue for ourselves. Now I'll hand it off to Sarah to talk about our volunteer infrastructure.
Thank you. So currently, our second proposal is for a volunteer infrastructure. Right now, LAYC does not have any sort of infrastructure for their volunteer program, but it is such a vital part of the organization. So we are proposing to create a volunteer coordinator position. And so the reason that we think that this is important is because of the investment feedback loop. So volunteer coordinators, through the Urban Institute, we found research that said that volunteer coordinators and the volunteers have a positive feedback loop that shows that when there's more time invested in volunteer coordinators, time, money, resources, then the actual efforts of the volunteers are better. And so then also the volunteer recruitment, when volunteers are invested in, they actually show that they are matched with organizations and programs that are for their skill sets, and they have a better amount of they have more success in the programs overall. And also a government report stated that value that volunteers provide should make an effective management position a vital part of the company. So this is showing that this position is so crucial to the organization that money should be invested in this volunteer coordinator position. And also about 6 million people in the United States who are not currently volunteering said that they would be interested in volunteering in organizations like LAYC if they had the information about these opportunities. So what will this volunteer coordinator position do? There are multiple job tasks that they will actually have to carry out, but one of them is a training program for volunteers. Right now, the volunteers that LAYC has do not go through a training session. And like we said before, for PYD, it's so crucial for these people who are coming into the organization to actually have training on what the organization is about, what our mission is, what we are looking to fulfill. And so in order to do that, they need to be trained on what LAYC is. And so there are two different types of trainers that come to LAYC to volunteer for our program. The first is the one-time volunteers, and the second are the more involved volunteers. And so the training session is for one-time volunteers would be more about the people who are just doing events. And so people who are volunteering for a turkey trot, or people who are volunteering for a Thanksgiving dinner, something like that, they need a less involved training session because they actually don't need the same specific training as the more involved volunteers. And so this would be about a 45-minute session from the volunteer coordinator, and the volunteers would sign up online, and it would be held before each event. So if there is a Thanksgiving dinner coming up, people will hear about the Thanksgiving dinner. They will sign up online to go through a training session, and only if they've gone through that training session would they be able to volunteer for that Thanksgiving dinner. And this would be held at a DC Anchor site or the Maryland Riggs Road site. And the reason that we're doing those two sites is because they are the most central to these two areas of LAYC. The second part of the volunteer program training sessions is for the more involved volunteers. So these are the people who are tutors, they are mentors, they are the people who have a little bit longer term commitments for LAYC. And so they actually need more training on what is going on in the organization. And so this would be a more comprehensive training session, about 2 hours long, and it would be held at the beginning of each semester at Georgetown University and the University of Maryland, because this is where LAYC gets most of their long-term involved volunteers from. And so with that, I want to recap and wrap up what our proposal is before we go into the Q&A session. So first we have the Positive Youth Development in Action. And what that is a licensed handbook that we will be selling to different organizations that have a similar mission to our own to actually improve their leadership development within their companies so that they can go on and serve the mission that they are looking to. And then the second proposal is for a volunteer infrastructure through this volunteer coordinator position that is the most vital for our organization, and they will hold different training sessions for the volunteers that come in to serve the organization. And with that, I'm going to now open up the floor for questions.
I have a question. So, in the actual
can speak a little bit to this. So what we'll do essentially is we'll invest in the design and development, and not being exactly sure as to how much that will cost. We believe it'll be probably between $10,000 to $20,000 to actually develop the curriculum and get it ready to like roll out completely prepared, licensed handbooks and everything. We will then track it over the 12 months, the efficacy of the program essentially, and after that, we'll that will be paid for as well. So we assume we plan to generate $15,000 to $20,000 of revenue in that first 12 months, even though it is like a trial period. It will be paid for by the organizations looking to implement that program. And what we'll do is once we have that, we'll have a better idea of whether we have to make certain iterations to the PYDIA framework and how it works in those organizations, or if it's ready for a rollout, we could change pricing options as to like kind of speaking to how effective it was in those organizations that we used it in. So exact projections for how much we'll generate in the 18 months after that, we're not totally sure, just because we haven't gotten the feedback from those first test sites yet.
And in addition to that, we looked at an example of the Boys and Girls Club of the Greater Washington area. And so if we sold this to their organization, which is 150 people in that region, we would generate about $15,500 of revenue from that. And so with that amount of money, we could probably project around the same amount of money for every different organization depending on size, because the cost of the program is dependent on each person. Because when we're training one person, that's about $150 or $100, and then $150 for each trainer. So it's it's a little bit loose because we don't know how big the organizations we're going to be selling to is, but around $15,500 for a 150-person company. Yes, so the one-time volunteers do come back multiple times. So if there's a one-time event, like I said, the Thanksgiving dinner, or if there's a 5K, if they only need to train one time, then they'll be able to come back for multiple events after that. So let's say this summer I want to volunteer for a 5K. I would go to the training session in June, and then I would be able to also go to or I would be able to volunteer for the Thanksgiving dinner in November. I would also be able to volunteer for different things throughout the entire year and would not have to go through that training session more than once. So it's actually, instead of deterring people away from it, it's asking for more of their time and asking for them to be more involved in LAYC through these one-time events, because they will have the ability to volunteer for one-time events more frequently.
So these metrics that we'll be using will be very specific to the organizations in which we implement the program. So our idea is that we'll work with them to kind of identify areas in which they would like to see improvement and what kind of measurables we can assess to those. But maybe for like the Boys and Girls Club, for instance, we would maybe talk about how staff is interacting with children, number of interactions, and things like that, quantitative and qualitative measures. But it's definitely going to be very specific to the organization and their goals for the program.
And then any metrics for like program?
For the effectiveness for LAYC itself, for PYD? Okay, so I think that's something that's been established that we have seen a great benefit from, and they would have the information to kind of back that up. But what we want to do is kind of say this has worked here, and now we're looking for something different that we can implement elsewhere, because just the PYD in itself is not a scalable kind of a revenue generation model elsewhere, just because it's so time intensive and it's very specific to our program that we run. So what we would do is essentially say it's worked here, now we're going to adapt it to work elsewhere.
PYDA with competition, we looked at AYD specifically, and we found out through research through their website that AYD has a cost of $200 per person to be involved. Our program is going to cost each trainee $100 and a trainer $150. So they will see value within this program not only because it's substantially less expensive, but it's also a more intuitive program that allows scalability for us as a company, and it also allows us to save time and resources, which equals increased revenue by not having to spend so much money on the actual issue, and it also allows us to train ourselves all the time. Other than AYD, is my question? So we looked at AYD and we looked at other possible solutions, which would be like an online module and also creating one ourselves. And we could speak to
So PYDA wasn't the only solution that we looked at for ourselves. We looked at AYD in terms of competition, but we also explored different ideas ourselves. We thought we explored like the consulting route where we would go in and kind of implement this program ourselves. We thought that that was not very easily implemented in each location, not very scalable, very much time intensive, and just didn't make much sense for us to, that was not the direction we were going to go in. We also explored online modules similar to that Alcohol EDU, where you're kind of guided through a program online. But again, that's just not our area of expertise, and the company that actually offers Alcohol EDU offers it as a free service. So that's not really a potential revenue generation for us. So we also said that that's not really our area of expertise. Going down this route wouldn't really generate enough revenue for us. So we identified PYDIA as our best solution that we had, and also it was competitively priced compared to our competition.
Any more questions? So currently, there is no actual volunteer coordinator position, and so many different people in LAYC are responsible for fulfilling this role. And so, if one person is responsible for housing for the underprivileged or this disconnected youth, then they have to go out and find the volunteers. Or if a tutoring program is looking for tutors, then they need to go out and find the volunteers. But this volunteer coordinator position would be a one person that knows all of the organizations, knows all of their needs, has created position descriptions for all of them, and can go out and find these people and can recruit from universities, can recruit from other external sources that really, because he or she would know all of these positions so well and would know what they were doing, it would just in general be streamlined.
And going along with that too, like right now, maybe you have to like call or be called to volunteer. Along with this person's duties, a lot of what they'll do is like provide someone who's looking to volunteer, just kind of like a checklist of like, oh, I need to go here, I need to go to this session, and to be able to volunteer for these programs. You check the boxes. Yeah.
So, to do that, we have to make ourselves